So, Isle of the Lost Blade is an action-focused first-person shooter where you play as a sword-wielding robot trying to stop an army of pirate robots from taking over an island and stealing your magic blade. But to tell the whole story, we gotta go back to the beginning. It was the middle of the pandemic, and I was pretty much at home all the time. I had a lot of free time, but I remembered that I previously bought this program called Game Maker Studio. I decided to dip my toes in the water. I was just scrolling through some YouTube tutorials when suddenly...
Yo, this idea just popped into my head. Turtles!
Uh-huh.
Okay, so get this. A game where you... You in?
We're gonna need someone who actually has game dev experience. Hey, so we're putting together a game dev team, and I know you've made some games before, and...
You in?
Sure.
So work began on the Untitled Turtle game. There was concept art made, some initial models, name ideas, but then we ran into a roadblock. Hey, do you know how to program 3D games?
Not really, no.
Well, that's a problem. So picking the game engine was the first big choice. Eventually I decided to go with Unity just because of the learning content that was available at the time. I opened up a new Unity 3D project and immediately had no idea what to do. Like most Unity beginners, I started with practically no programming knowledge. So as I tried to follow my first tutorials, I was hit with a lot of questions like, what in the mother of pearl is a vector 3? What's a float and why do we have to put an F at the end of the number? What are public and private variables? I had no idea. And that's how it went for the first few months, just watching tutorial after tutorial after tutorial on how to make the simplest things work in Unity. I obviously bit off a bit more than I could chew.
Got any ideas for our small beginner game?
Well, there was an idea, and it's totally original. We'll call it... The new project idea was set, new concept art was drawn out, and a brand new story was... Well, it was in the works. We brainstormed some titles before deciding on calling our new game. The new setting helped fuel a bunch of new ideas, so we ran with it. Noel started running our marketing and designed some enemies, while Curtis made the majority of our 3D models. The main gameplay hook was going to be teleportation. Basically, I wanted to make the player feel like Minato using his teleporting jutsu. And the result was, well... But hey, I got it working. There was this teeny weeny little issue though. Sometimes we'd have a power outage and my computer would shut off. It was annoying. Development on the game went into hyperdrive as we designed and created a cast of enemies that the player would fight. Enemy AI was something that would take me about another 1.5 years to become comfortable with. I mean, even today it's still something that I often struggle with, but man, those early days of the project... Yeah. I eventually figured out a way to get enemies to behave differently, in ways that I could actually control. It was kind of janky at first, but I guess for all intents and purposes it worked. It was going pretty well, all things considered. But then, remember those power outages I told you about? Well, one day in March of 2021, I was working on the game. I was in the middle of saving a scene when suddenly... The outage didn't even last long. It was just a flicker, but that was enough for the computer to have to restart. I didn't sweat it at first. I opened the project again, and that was when I saw it. This massive wall of red text. Error logs that spanned in the hundreds of thousands of lines. I tried to press play. As it turned out, that power blip corrupted my hard drive and pretty much invalidated the entire project. Some scripts and models were there, but too much had been broken and it wasn't gonna make it. And me, being the absolute amateur that I was, I didn't even think to save a copy of the project file on a separate drive. I didn't feel like doing anything for pretty much a whole week. I was demoralized, but I learned a valuable lesson.
You doing okay?
Nope. Not really. But then again, what else is new?
It's okay to take a break from the project for a bit. Maybe go for a walk or something.
Alright, time to get back into action. I'd been struggling with trying to make the movement of the player feel satisfying to control for the better part of 6 months, and I never thought about using rigid bodies. In Unity, rigid bodies are the components used by the physics engine to simulate, well, physics. I figured if we were going to start from scratch anyway, I might as well make a brand new character controller. And so I worked to recreate the project again from scratch. It took me about 3 months to get back up and running with a new physics-based controller, and it felt way better this time. Since the enemies had been animated inside of Unity, I also had to reanimate them as well. This time I decided to switch over to Blender since I had been learning a little bit more of its animation systems. For the next several months I worked on polishing up the player's combat controls. I designed 4 additional sword concepts that the player would switch between, acting as the different firing abilities. Each sword had a primary and alternate fire. The primary fire represents traditional FPS weapons like shotguns, snipers, and rockets, but the alternate fire is designed to be a bit more specialized. We'll go into more detail on those in a future video. I also decided to completely revamp how the enemy AI system worked, utilizing Unity's animator component, which also acted as a finite state machine. This way I could manually control the different behaviors of each enemy type and customize them to my liking. Even though FSMs aren't all that common in modern day enemy AI programming anymore, I felt that it was simple enough to get some decent modular behavior for our enemies. Also, I haven't really researched enough about behavior trees or how to build them out, but it's certainly something that I'd like to learn a bit more of in the future. As of this devlog, we have several enemies modeled and programmed. The Smee Blues and Smee Reds that make up the backbone of the pirate armies, Smee Alphas, which are stronger versions of the Smee bots, Sloops, a rapid-fire cousin of the Smee Reds, Blimey Boys, a blade-wielding robot that fires off volleys of projectiles, the Scrap Bots, a massive robot that acts like a tank, the Quartermaster, agile robots with homing projectiles that return to them, Tac-Tacs, wall-crawling mining bots that spit out acid that drains the player's energy, Squawks, a flying parrot that hurls blades from its feathers, and the Snapbacks, giant dinosaur-like robots that attack the player. In the past couple of months, we've implemented sweeping changes to certain gameplay mechanics. The player can throw their sword and teleport to it, which starts a cooldown meter. Once the cooldown is over, the player can teleport again. You can also deflect most projectiles, including the sword. A viable strategy in combat is to throw the sword and deflect it towards the nearby enemies to deal extra damage. You can also dash around to quickly evade enemy attacks and stay on your feet. In fact, it's encouraged. Enemies are still being tweaked to find the right balance between being fun to fight and challenging. That was a lot of ground to cover, and I'm sure I missed a lot of the more mundane things like main menus, UI, and the player death animations, but we'll cover more of that as we develop them in future videos. Thanks for staying around and watching. If you're interested in keeping up to date with the game, follow our Twitter or join the Discord in the links below. Thanks for joining us on Isle of the Lost Blade.